Coming to you live from the Beltline in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm your host, Kelly Bastian, and if you think you're a normal person, welcome to the Normal Person Podcast.
Some people act like normal's a four-letter word, but most of us want to be normal. To sit and talk for a bit about it, whatever it is. Are you okay today to press play? Is there any other way to be normal?
This week, we're excited to announce that after a few months of negotiating back and forth on Facebook Marketplace, we have finally purchased a major upgrade to our podcast production. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now the proud owners of a working time machine, the only working time machine to ever exist. And this week, we're inviting passing strangers into the passenger seat to tell us where they want to take this baby first.
I would go back to ancient Macedonia.
I guess the birth of my first child.
I would probably go to Hendrix upon his deathbed and or Prince.
So I believe that factory farming is one of the greatest atrocities of our generation. So I'd be going back in the 1920s to stop it.
Spanning almost 3,000 years of human history in only 30 minutes, we're firing up our fancy new time machine and traveling any and every place our guest imaginations can conjure. Who's excited? Okay, while I'm putting these delicate power crystals into that time machine's highly explosive fusion reactor, I want to encourage you to sit back and think about what you would do if you had just acquired a time machine. Where in history would you take it first and why? Would you change anything about the past or the future? And, most importantly, would you ever want to come back to the present? Okay, good. It looks like everything is fired up and ready to go. Luckily, our first guest of the day didn't waste any time explaining where and why he would like to travel in time. So, without further ado, let's see if we can get this time machine actually working. Welcome to the Normal Person Podcast. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start out by just asking what your name is.
My name is Vidal.
Vidal?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Vidal. Yeah, everybody kind of gets confused. It actually has French roots.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the etymology?
I don't know anything deeper than it has French roots, and it means life. The shortened pretense of it is vita or vital with a T.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that just means life, yeah.
Okay. So what brings you out here?
Okay, so I'm out here because I called out of work, technically.
Hey, right here.
I know this is going on the internet, but who cares? Anybody could find me anytime they want to. I work at Barcelona Wine Bar right down the street.
Do you really want to at them like that? I mean, sure, that's fine.
It's fine. It's
Barcelona
fine.
Wine Bar.
Yeah, Barcelona Wine Bar. I love them, by the way.
What's it like?
It's a Spanish-style restaurant. They sell tapas and just Spanish-style cuisine that you would find in Barcelona. The service is great. Courtney will take care of you. Like, it's great time.
Ask for Courtney?
Yes, ask for Courtney, please.
Ask for Courtney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody listening, please ask for Courtney.
Everyone.
She's the best GM ever.
Wow. Courtney, I hope you're listening because I'm going to be there at your bar in about 4 hours. You are a very chill person, so I feel like I don't need to ask too many icebreakers. I kind of want to just hear what you have to say about today's question. You ready to jump into it?
I think so. Let's do it.
Cool. So, if you could travel to any moment in history, where would you go and why?
Okay, so initially, I know we spoke off camera and I said one thing, but I think I'm going to change my answer.
You're not going to go back to the 1930s?
No, 1930s. Although that would be amazing. I just don't want to fight in a war.
Yeah,
okay?
That's fair.
I would go back to ancient Macedonia.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a wild choice.
I'm a history nerd.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just full exposure. I want to see Alexander the Great.
Okay.
In battle.
Person. Oh, in battle.
Yes.
Specifically. Which battle?
So there's a famous battle where he initially fought the Persian Empire.
Okay.
He fought a king named King Darius. And
Wow.
it was the initial time that the whole encircling movement of Blitzkrieg, if you're familiar with it. I know it's probably not a great thing to bring up on a podcast considering it has roots in World War II.
Yes,
I'd love to see that in action.
Wow.
I'm such a nerd. I'm so fascinated by war. I'm fascinated by great people in society, whether they were actually morally good or not.
Right.
Still one of the more famous people to ever live. So
going back to that, you said you're a history nerd, right?
a little.
Tell me a little bit about like what it is about that time period, I know you're kind of more interested in seeing Alexander the Great and like a battle, but is there anything about that specific time period that you just find interesting?
I think just that period and his impact and that whole empire's impact on culture, specifically Western culture, is really fascinating to me because we are the product of Western culture.
Yeah.
You know, we are still living out all of that happened. And I really think that was the rise of the West in the world. I think that was
You think
the start.
that specific moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the start. Although dynasties and empires fall and rise again, I think there would be no us without those critical moments.
Right.
You know?
Right. We barely got the time machine out of that ancient Macedonian battle, and it looks like our next guest, an electrical engineer based out of Atlanta, wants to take us right back into an active war zone. Except this isn't the type of warfare you might be used to. It's more like a battle of the brains. You'll see what I mean.
I was thinking about it, and this has more to do with my career with electrical engineering.
Sure.
But I would want to go back to the time of when electricity was really being developed for the grid,
Okay.
and maybe like an era of when Tesla and Edison were kind of fighting
Oh, yeah.
and battling it out to figure out, like, is it going to be DC electricity or AC electricity?
What is the difference between those two? I know you're an electrical engineer, but can you explain it to someone pretend our audience is 6-year-olds, okay? And I want you to just break this down.
Yeah, so with DC electricity, you just have a current that stays at the same value at all times.
Okay, constant.
It's constant.
'Kay.
Same thing with the voltage.
Okay.
A lot of renewables involve DC electricity, so like solar panels or batteries.
Okay.
That's often
Yeah.
DC. And then the conversion to AC is just where it's varying over a time period.
Gotcha.
So the power on our house is AC, and it's constantly changing every microsecond.
So, and again, 6-year-olds, right? Why does it matter? That's like the main question.
With DC power and electricity, the whole idea with that was Edison's creation, and he wanted to, develop the grid. And the idea was that DC would be the solution early
Gotcha.
on. So it was essentially like the first adoption of electricity.
Gotcha.
But then Tesla came around, and other engineers, not just Tesla, and scientists, came up with AC power. And what they found is that AC power can be distributed over longer distances without as much losses of power.
Okay, that makes sense. So going back to that time period, would you try to influence, knowing you're an electrical engineer, would you try to change the outcomes of what happened, or do you think where we're at now is a natural outcome? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think where we're at now is a natural outcome of their research. I would have liked to have just been a fly on the wall to kind of hear about it and maybe support it, or I think it'd just be really cool to like have helped or
just be a part of it, because it literally was just like you're capturing the power of electricity essentially, you know?
Right.
No, that's crazy. What time period was that, by the way?
This would have been towards the late 1800s, when there was really the fight over DC and AC, but electricity's been worked on for the last 2,000 years.
Right.
So it's really just been like from the start of people rubbing their feet on a carpet, and then their hair starts flying up, to people capturing that energy within a light bulb or a kite, developing it from there.
No, that's a really insightful answer. Now it's making me want to watch several documentaries. And also understand the AC/DC debate, not the band, but more like the power struggle. Again, no pun intended there, but it sounds very fascinating.
Yeah.
What about you? Okay. I should have probably mentioned this at the beginning of today's episode. I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I do have a limited amount of these power crystals. And looking at my fusion reactor right now, it looks like we have a little bit over half a tank. So we're good for now. I'm very excited to introduce you to the next two guests of today's episode, who both decided in completely separate interviews to take the time machine to the exact same time period. But for two completely different reasons.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, Prohibition was at the 20s or 30s. I can't, whichever one it was, I feel like.
I think it was the 20s.
The 20s. And so because of that, you know how rap is a lot of fantasy about being in illegal positions?
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of these rappers aren't doing the things that they're saying.
Right.
But they're rapping about it because it's fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's like watching Scarface. You sympathize with Scarface. So me in the 30s, I would have loved to have been a bootlegger. My bathtub would have had the finest gin in it.
Oh my God.
My toilet would have had rosé.
Do you know what a gin den is?
I do not, but I would have one. The reason I would be a bootlegger is the same reason I never went into drug dealing. Like, I grew up in the 90s, right? I grew up in a very impoverished neighborhood in the 90s. So drug dealing was cool.
Yeah.
But one thing I knew about myself was that I'm a creative. And as a creative, I would have done stuff like tried to add cinnamon and chocolate and vanilla extract and stuff to the recipe. And the police would have came and got me immediately.
Yeah. Have you seen Breaking Bad?
I would have been
the chili pea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It would have been something like that. It'd have been like, oh, this isn't, the blue stuff. This is, blue Kool-Aid.
Blue gin.
Yeah, this is blue Kool-Aid gin crack. So
okay. Well, okay. So you're in this mindset of like you're going in there. The drug culture.
Like to me, yeah, my mindset is I'm about to kill him. But to the police, it would have been like, he's the only person out here with cinnamon crack. So let's go get him. Everybody else has got regular crack and he's got cinnamon crack. Let's get him.
Wow. Yeah.
So that would have been in Prohibition. That probably would have been me too. It'd have probably been like, oh my God, have you tasted, like, what's a fruit that nobody makes wine out of? Watermelon wine. Like, have you tasted his watermelon wine? And I know as a black person that doesn't come off culturally great, but still, watermelon is fantastic.
I would have it.
And watermelon wine, I feel like I would be the only person in Prohibition with watermelon wine.
Why has no one done that?
That is a good question.
Yeah, like, I'm just now thinking about that because they have blackberry wine, like strawberry wine, like all these berry wines.
They make wines out of the berries that grow on bushes you're not even supposed to eat.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm so shocked no one's ever made a watermelon wine. It's got all right. I feel really dirty being around all these bootleggers here in 1930. So let's fire this up and take it back, I don't know, to the 20s. Let's see what our other early 20th century time-traveling guest has to say about what they would do in this very strange but transformative time in American history. You've been waiting a while, and you said also that you walked and you kind of already thought of this question, so I kind of want to cut through the ice a little bit, and we'll jump right into the question.
Sure.
Give you some time. But if you could travel to any moment in history, no strings attached, where would you go?
1920 in the United States.
Okay, why's that?
So I believe that factory farming is one of the greatest atrocities of our generation. Right up there with genocide, slavery. It's awful.
Yeah.
And if you trace the origins, it really kicked off in the 1920s.
Really?
So I'd be going back to stop it.
Okay. So single-handedly, like, altering history. Yeah.
Yes. If anything can happen, that's my dream.
So I don't know that much about, just to give you some context about myself, I'm an English major. My only perception of this issue is that they change the names of dead animals so we disassociate, right? Like pork is not pig, beef is not cow, you know what I mean? So that's all I know is I'm like, we're in this culture where that dead piece of meat is not an animal, it's just meat.
I guess it must have been about 10 years ago when I was trying to decide whether to become vegan, and I was just doing a ton of research, reading everything I could, and at some point, the question must have crossed my mind, like, how did we even get here?
Right. Naturally, yeah.
Yeah. If you look at the supermarket on the packages, you see, like, happy animals in fields, and I believed that was the reality.
Yeah.
And once I started reading about factory farming, I was like, so when did we switch from happy animals in fields to, like, these poor animals being, like, abused? And
literally.
Yeah. And
like a Holocaust for animals.
Exactly. Yeah. When was that exactly? So that's kind of how I found out.
Okay. What is it about the 1920s that people need to know? You said it's kind of the beginning of this, but like what specifically sparked that?
So I think at that time, people, especially in Western cultures, thought of animals as just sort of like machines almost. A lot of like behavioral research was just like, we do input, we get output.
Yeah.
And they didn't think of animals as like sentient beings with emotions and fears and, they can feel pain and all these things. So now we know that all of that is true.
Right.
So if I could go back and sort of deliver this research from the future, like look at all these things we now know to be true about animals, we can't look at them as just a commodity to mass produce.
Yeah.
And maybe that would change some minds.
I think it would. Going back to that time period with this mission, because you're the first person that's ever been like, I want to go back to the time. So far on today's episode, our guests have had a wide array of motives and reasons for where they would want to travel in time. But what if your reason for traveling in time was to unravel the mysteries of time itself? You'll be very surprised to hear what our next guest has to say, not just about where he would take the time machine first, but what his thoughts were about the topic of time travel in general.
My name is Francois Kiste-Edouard.
Wow, okay, French?
Yeah, my grandma's Portuguese.
Okay.
She was raised in like Bordeaux, France, and
Yeah.
World War II, so she's kind of...
So I love that name personally. My name's Kelly, by the way.
Kelly?
Yes.
Pleasure.
So let's just jump into the question. How does that
For
feel?
sure.
If you could travel back to any moment in history, where would you go and why?
Well, if I could be the observer of everything, I would probably... Oh, man, it's tough because I would probably go to Hendrix upon his deathbed and or Prince. Because,
Hendrix.
Yeah, it's
On the
either it's
deathbed?
Hendrix or... Well, meaning as in right before they passed.
Just to do what?
What kind of question? What are things I don't understand about things that are bigger than us that I don't understand?
And you think being in that last final moments, he's going to have that perspective?
Anyone that's hunted knows who's hunting them. If you ask them, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
They'll tell you something.
Yeah.
Something will be told.
That is true. So you want to know from one of the greats of, as they're dying, like, what is death? Is that
not what's death, but like, why are you dying? Who's killing you? What's the goal with what you were trying to do? Do you know that that's why they killed you?
Wow.
Do you know that's why they wanted to get rid of you?
Do you think that's what's happening with him?
Oh, I mean,
he was a counterculture figure for sure, but...
Well, to put it simple, super simple and sweet,
yeah.
Anything in the world that requires or has influence needs to be controlled.
So, who was the other person you said?
Prince.
Hendrix and Prince. So, would that be different? Those two situations, same situation?
Same deal.
So, there was a show that came out a really long time ago, and this is going to make you laugh, but...
I love it.
It had James Franco was the lead.
Okay, James
Obviously,
Franco.
He's like canceled and stuff now, but like...
Yeah.
In the show, he had and I don't know what the show was called. I just remember watching it 10 or 15 years ago. He had the ability to go back to this exact same day, which was in this day, it was 1 month before JFK got assassinated.
Oh, I think I've heard about this.
Yeah. And so he would go back and like he could travel back to the present anytime he wanted, but anytime he went back, it would always start back on that timeline, right?
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So the reason I'm explaining this is in this show, the more he goes back, the more he realizes history is being written in real time, right?
Yes.
Like there are people that know what's happening, and they want it to happen.
Oh,
and,
sure.
And every time that he would try to change the outcome of things, there would be this natural resistance,
regardless of whatever.
Do you think that that's
of
true?
course?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, time is superpositional.
Right.
Superpositional meaning it isn't in a straight line. It is the infinite probabilities of a coin toss landing on heads and or tails at the same time and or any infinite between that. And so I think time is very superpositional. So even if you decided to take a path, that path still has a set of resistances that need to happen in order for it to function as something with proper gravity for the situation, has to happen.
I want to ask you something just because I feel like you're the only person today that's really getting into the weeds of this.
For sure.
What's your just perspective in general? Like, what are your thoughts on traveling backwards in time?
I think traveling backwards in time is like going forwards in time and in reverse. It's the same.
Yeah, I mean,
you're going back in time. Even if you're going back in time to solve a problem, doesn't mean that the problem wasn't the solution. So it's still both. Okay. The problem is the solution, and the solution is the problem. So regardless of what position you decide to go, X, Y, Z, or any type of plane you decide to go on, it's still mapped out with the same amount of ripples that particular mass can provide. So it's still the same. It's never going to change.
Are you kind of saying there is no such thing as free will?
No. Free will is you are only within function. Free will cannot exist. It only exists outside of every space of the universe, which means has no purpose.
Yeah.
Which the moment you think about purpose, you have function, which means you cannot escape will.
Yeah.
Because then you will want to do something.
Wow.
So there's no way to get around it.
Did I already ask you this? Do you have a podcast?
No.
Okay. But you're an audience. If you've listened this far, you might be wondering something that I've thought too. Why hasn't anyone wanted to travel into the future? As our last guest and new friend Francois pointed out in his thesis on time travel, traveling into the future only presents one serious real risk. What if you discover that your life is predetermined and not what you hoped it would be? Can you change it? I think I'll let our last guest of the day help answer that very big question, albeit in the form of a hopeful message to the future.
My name is Jack. I'm a copywriter.
Oh, nice. How long have you been doing that?
I've been doing it for about 4 years now.
Okay.
Moved to Atlanta about a year ago. Yeah.
Where'd you move from?
Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia.
Have you
I
been?
didn't know. The way I said that made it seem like I had an opinion about it, but I
Cool.
don't. I really don't.
People that have been there definitely have opinions.
Why is that?
It's just got a lot of history, a lot of bad history, but also a lot of in the recent years, since the 70s on, just built a really interesting aura, I would say, kind of punk.
Oh, okay.
Kind of
like a counterculture scene a little.
Yeah, they were the capital of the rebellion with the Confederacy.
Yeah.
But that aura of rebellion has kind of it stuck with
the
it for sure.
spirit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but people are much more in tune with
they're rebelling.
the wokeness,
Yeah.
I guess,
It's they're rebelling against culture. I just want to say for clarification, I did support the Union in 1865 when I was alive.
This is on the record.
Yes.
Let it be known.
My hot take is don't agree with the Confederacy, but it is a counterculture movement.
It is a counterculture, yeah.
Yeah.
And the counterculture is definitely stuck with Richmond.
Yes.
In a good way.
Cool.
Some good ways.
So what brought you to Atlanta? I mean, obviously a job, but why Atlanta?
The job was kind of the means to get here.
Okay.
I grew up in Richmond and I went to college an hour away.
Okay.
So I'd been in Virginia my whole life.
Right.
And kind of came time to want to spread my wings.
Yeah.
And get out of the hometown. And I was thinking, I'm not really the kind of person that would think way down the road. I like to live in the moment. I like to be kind of spontaneous. But as I was thinking way down the road, Richmond, I had a solid job, had a solid everything. My family's there, social group. I had everything that I needed for a good life, but it was almost too comfortable. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to leave. And
you want a little bit of a challenge.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I respect that. So I want to just ask you this and take it any direction you want. This is complete fantasy and hypothetical.
Okay.
If you could travel to any moment in history, where would you go and why?
I'm just going to run with the first thing that pops into my mind whenever that happens.
It's always right.
I'd probably bump forward in the future. And I guess the birth of my first child.
Okay.
Probably.
You want to go into the future, actually.
Can I go into the future?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool.
Yeah. Birth of your first child. We're just imagining, how far away do you think that is?
In the next 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 years.
Going to this moment, what are the takeaways? What do you want to know?
Life is, I guess I already know this, but I would take away at the moment, being a fly on the wall, invisible. Life is excruciating pain, but also incredible beauty. What do they call the birth room in the hospital?
I don't know.
The birth room. That's kind of what the birth room kind of seems like.
You're obviously experiencing someone's worst moment of pain.
Yeah.
And as a man, it's hard to empathize with that. But
totally removed, literally. Yeah.
I'm interested though. Is it something that in your life you really are anticipating and wanting to happen?
I had a interesting, probably not interesting, but my whole life I always wanted kids, and then I had a role model. First person I ever really met, I was like, hey man, what's your family like? And he was like, oh, we're good. And I was like, how many kids do you have? And he was like, what are you talking about? I don't have kids. And that was kind of a pretty groundbreaking moment for me.
Why is that?
Because I always thought that people had kids. I guess in the suburban culture that I grew up in, everyone had a kid or several kids or a wife or a husband or one of the two, some sort of combination.
Right.
So when I learned that, I was like, wait a second, you don't have to actually have one. So for a solid 6-year stretch of my life, I was like, I'm never doing it. Why would I if I don't have to do it? And in the recent years, I've kind of reverted in a good way back to kind of like the knack, not the knack, but like the yearning, the pining to be a father.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you want it. You want it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, do you want to say anything to your first child that he can listen to in the future?
What's going on? Off the cuff. I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm the most eloquent person.
It's honestly really unfair for me to even ask that. You know what I mean?
It's a good like thought starter though, because I've never thought about even what I would say. Rarely do I ever think about what I would do.
Yeah.
And when I do get to that point, a lot of fear kind of like seeps in. I'm like, shit, am I really gonna be ready for this?
Well, how about this? Make it simpler. What do you think he should know about you?
I got this really good advice from somebody a few years ago.
Okay.
That it costs you nothing to be nice. And so far in my life, I've, that was kind of a bit of a eureka when I heard that, that I put a bunch of puzzle pieces together and kind of like solved the puzzle when he said that. But I kind of learned it along the way that, I played a bit of the victim, losing friendships and relationships, and kind of realized that I didn't really invest enough in the freeness of nice being completely available.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if that actually says much about me at all, other than
beautiful.
a bad thing. But
no, it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good lesson, and especially in the future. I don't even know how disassociated people are going to be socially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really is something, especially as we've witnessed in this current moment. Like social media breeds more negativity and stuff than positivity. It really doesn't take that much to just be nice to people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Normal Person Podcast, where we've broken all known laws of physics and string theory to bring the time-traveling dreams of a few everyday normal people to life. I want to thank each and every guest for making today's very special episode possible. And, of course, I want to thank you, the listener, for going on this pseudo Back to the Future style adventure with me. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing or following the show so you never miss a new episode. And if you really liked it, we'd love to hear from you on where you would take our fancy new time traveling machine if given the chance. Send us your thoughts via email or on social media at normalpersonpod, and we'll share our favorite responses this week only on Instagram. Till next time, thanks for listening. And actually be careful if you ever do decide to time travel. I'm Kelly Boston, and we'll see you next week.